Today, I have Donna Alward, who is an amazing writer, has been one of my best friends for a really long time. And you're just going to love her because I love her. And she's Canadian. So she's super sweet and super nice. But we're going to talk about moving from romance, which is where Donna and I met, into historical fiction, which is where Donna has had a career that exploded beyond what she already had, which was pretty impressive. Welcome to the podcast, Donna. You did a lot of romances like me. I think I wrote 52 before I finally started moving into something else. That before you started writing historical fiction, what made you change?
This month is my 20th anniversary of publishing. And I had been writing romance for about 15 years, 16 years. COVID happened. And I'd already been thinking about maybe doing something a little different, like maybe women's fiction or something like romance adjacent, wanting to just expand a little bit. I was also getting a little older. Actually, an email hit my inbox from my now editor. The imprint that she manages was looking for historical fiction or rom-com set in Canada, which I'm Canadian. That request alone got my attention because that doesn't happen very often. And then I thought about rom-com, and I like to think that I'm, sarcastic and funny. But being funny on purpose, like in comedy, is a very different skill set. And I was looking for something romance adjacent. So rom-com was a little too close, but like secretly historical fiction has been my favorite genre to read for a very long time. And I had never ventured that in that direction because I was afraid of it. I was afraid of the amount of work that goes into the research. Because it is a lot of work. Afraid of getting it wrong, of getting, hate email in my inbox saying, like, did you actually think you could do this? Like, it just intimidated me a lot. And then, I was getting close to 50 at that point. And I just thought, well, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? And I knew for sure that if I got 5 years down the road, I would look back and go, you idiot, why didn't you do that? Like, what's the worst that could happen? I'd try it. I'd either hate it or it would bomb and I would go and do something else, right? But it's not like it's the end of anything. So I did it, and it turned out far better than I had anticipated. It was actually, a sign from the universe in the form of an email saying, have you ever thought about? And, I try to pay attention to those.
It's also how I ended up in romantic suspense. I had sent in a proposal for a book that was supposed to be a women's fiction / romance, like a little bit meatier kind of romance. And it just sat there at HarperCollins forever. And then one of the romantic suspense editors saw it and said, hey, can you turn this into a romantic suspense? I'm like, I can do whatever you ask me to do.
Right.
But I'd been doing the same thing. I'd been really wanting to get into straight suspense. And I saw this as like a skip over to that. And I'm still working on getting into straight suspense, but the romantic suspense has allowed me to kind of dip my toes in the water and gradually start moving over to there. Now, you changed your name slightly when you went into historical fiction and you added the Jones, your maiden name, right, to it. And why did you do that and take away just doing Donna Alward?
I wanted to differentiate from historical fiction and romance. And the truth is, a lot of my romance readers will come with me to historical fiction. But my historical fiction readers won't necessarily make the move back to romance. It's kind of a weird thing. But I didn't want to do something completely different, which would mean possibly doubling up on websites, doubling up on like socials and stuff. I wanted to be able to maintain that. And there was also sort of an SEO component to it that I wanted to address. Donna Jones Alward is my historical fiction name, but I gotta say, I sign more books now than I used to, and I'm kind of regretting having a longer name and not a shorter name. So now it's just a J in the middle now.
As a former hyphenated author, yeah, I totally agree with that.
Right. You were talking about you said to your editor, like, I can do whatever you want. I was just doing some dates with Janie Chang, who's from Vancouver. Well, not Vancouver, but Sunshine Coast. And we were talking about that and getting revisions and everything. And she was like, I love a good assignment. And I'm like, absolutely. I'm such a good assignment girl.
In the publishing industry, in the traditional publishing industry anyways, you learn to be a can-do person because they're going to come to you with all kinds of things that you think there's no way I can do this. I remember being the 15th book in a 15-book continuity. It was hell. It was the
No,
worst. It never sold that well because it was set in New Orleans post Katrina, and we were not allowed to mention Katrina. People
no.
didn't like that. You just never know how it will come around if you don't take those chances.
You learn about what you don't want to do
Mm-hmm.
as much as you learn what you do want to do. And then sometimes just making those choices opens you up to new people that can lead to something else. Like the whole
Right.
reason why I got the email asking if I'd be interested is because my editor used to work at Mills and Booth.
Oh, wow.
Her boss at the time was my first senior editor. So her boss at the time was Kim Young.
Mm-hmm.
And so my name came up in a meeting, and that's just because of Mills and Boon. Now Charlotte's running the imprint and also my editor, and I love working with her. You just never know. Publishing's a small world, and
You and I have been to conferences a million times and known a lot of people. It is such a small world. And my kids still ask me, like, do you know this person? Like, I've been watching Scarpetta on Prime, and my husband's like, do you know her? And I'm like, yeah, I've met Pat Cornwall a bunch of times. We're not buddies, but I know who she is. And I immediately recognized her on TV. And I'm still a dork that's like, oh my God, that's Pat. I know Pat.
doesn't mean you stop fangirling. I fangirl all the
Right.
time.
I know. Yeah. Tell me about I got some autographed copies here from other authors that I'm like, oh my God. And then, or if they respond to me on threads or something, I get super, super stoked. I think part of that is that you never feel like you're here, despite all the accolades and numbers beside my name and all of that. I've never felt like I'm at their level ever. I'm always like, I feel
Yeah.
still like kind of the newbie. Like, I don't know. I got
Yeah.
lucky with a couple of bestseller lists, and
Right.
I still don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Same. All the time. It's not necessarily imposter syndrome. It's at the heart of it. We just do what we do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we just write the books and we struggle with writing the books, and sometimes we have ideas rejected, and sometimes we have big revisions, and we're still just doing the work. It's weird thinking about yourself up here.
Right.
My first historical fiction, When the World Fell Silent, did like crazy in Canada, just took off. And people say, oh, but you're a big deal, and I'm like, no, not a big deal.
Right.
Well, not a big
Right.
deal. So
Right.
I think it's just, we know how much work goes into it, and we're just like any other writer out there in the trenches writing
Right.
books.
With insecurity abounding. With my channel, I hired a coach, and she was another woman. And she's like, why are you not mentioning all of these books you've sold, all of these credentials that you have? And I'm like, well, that happened in 2007 and that happened in 2017. And it doesn't count. And she's like, it totally counts. It's a cumulative thing, and it totally counts. And you earned that, and you need to be proud of that. But then when I do, you've got those people that'll come along and be like, well, that's flexing. And I'm like, okay, maybe it is, but I did earn that. So I think we're constantly, especially as women, in this battle between I'm really proud of everything that I have achieved, but I don't want to mention it because I don't want people thinking I'm cocky or narcissistic or whatever. But there's also
Right.
there's a degree of professionalism and expertise here that I have that somebody else might not have. So I'm always trying to tread that line between, yes, I did
I
this.
know. And I was at a festival last year. The moderator asked me about my romance history. And when I mentioned that I had written 65,
Mm-hmm.
like there was a collective gasp in the room. And I'm like, yes, this is actually my 69th book. And the one I'm working on right now is number 70, which when I think about it over 20 years, I've been a busy girl.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, there is a level of expertise and knowledge and industry knowledge. One of the nice things that comes with that is I no longer have the urge to panic
Mm-hmm.
if something goes wrong, or like the whole idea of writing my historical fiction and the possibility of it failing didn't really bother me at all, because I've been through a couple of could have been career ending moments
Mm-hmm.
in those 20 years, and clearly did not end my career. So, you just learn that you pivot and you do something else, and you love the work, and everything works out in the end. I don't panic like I did the first time
And you
that
keep showing up
something
at the
happened.
page. If you put words down, you've got something to work
Yeah,
with, is what I tell people.
yeah. I think it was 2017. I hit a really massive speed bump. Like it was actually more of a brick wall than a speed bump, and I really had to evaluate what I wanted to do next.
Hmm.
And I was a woman without a publisher,
Hmm.
and I just had to go and rebuild again, and it's never starting from square one. And so I think now I just don't panic. I
Right,
just
right.
you know figure it out and keep going.
You talk about the 65 books. When I was in Dubai, I was with a lot of other authors. It's a book
Mhm.
festival, so a ton of other authors. But I had told people that I've published 87, and I was like a zoo animal. People would bring me along. The person that knew was like, "Tell people how many you wrote." And I'd say 87. And they'd be like, "Oh my God." I think that there's certain genres where they expect you to just do one or two books a year, whereas romance, the books are generally shorter. I mean, not all of mine were. My single titles were really long, but my mass market were shorter. And you also are expected, because romance readers buy so many books, you are expected to put that many out, and you learn how to
Yeah,
do that.
but I got to say, one of the biggest adjustments for me has been wrapping my mind around the fact that I don't have to be in that productivity loop. For me, having a book every 12 to 18 months
Mm-hmm.
feels very different. But I spend, 6 months doing research now.
Right, right.
And that's very different. And it takes me longer to write these. If I do feel like I'm going to panic, it's not about what fails or not, feeling like I'm not productive enough.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm so used for so many years being in that loop of write, revise, copy edits and proofreads. And by the time you get to the copy edit stage, you're already working on your next book or signing
Yes.
a new contract or whatever. Like it's a consistent productivity loop. And not being in that it's been a weird feeling.
I feel
I'm
like you're
good,
not
but
living up
sometimes
to what you were supposed to do because, well, crap, I wrote 6 books a year back in 2008. Why am I
I
not
know.
writing six
Why
books a
can't I
year
do
now?
that now? But I'm writing something completely different,
Mm-hmm.
with different expectations, and I'm different. I don't keep the same pace at 53 as
Mm-hmm.
I did when I was 35 and 40. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with that.
Yes.
And my publisher's happy with 12 to 18 months. So that's a fairly good schedule for me.
The things that make you, Donna Alward, an author, are present in both the romance and the historicals. And for those that don't know, I have done a continuity before with Donna and another author where we wrote a series of sisters books together, and it was really fun because we were able to really kind of study each other's books. And she and I did a scene where I wrote from one sister's point of view, and then she wrote the scene from
Yeah.
the other sister's point of view. And that's one of my favorite things that we've ever done. That thing that makes you a great author is that emotional arc, that relationships, the
Mm.
friendships, the really in-depth examination of the female characters. And I've noticed that that's a big common element in both of those books. That same thing that I love about your other books is present in these. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of people think romance is just this big arc between the hero and heroine, but there's so much more underneath to make it good and make it successful. So, how did you take that
Yeah.
same emotional part and merge it with all of this research that you have to put into the book, too?
One of the best lessons that romance taught me was how to really figure out goal, motivation, and conflict.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what I'm writing, I still want to know what my character wants, why they want it, and why they can't have it. When it comes down to it, my editor has said this as well. The book is about the character. A historical event provides the framework. What the book is really about is the characters, and quite often about a theme.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was something Renee Ryan told me early on, was that a lot of like romance seems to be trope based, but historical fiction tends to be theme based. With Ship of Dreams, which is my most recent one, it's really about the enduring bonds of friendship and
Mm-hmm.
women helping other women. And those are the two things that I really felt strongly about and were sort of a touchstone as I kept working my way through that book.
You chose two major historical events to focus on, and the first one's a little bit more personal because you are Canadian, and when the world fell silent focuses on the Halifax explosion of 1917. So, what was that like researching something that was so close to home when you did that? And I do think that's a big part of what made it a bestseller for so many weeks.
So I had the Halifax explosion, where two ships collided in the harbor in the First World War. One was carrying munitions. It leveled the city and killed almost 2,000 people and wounded several thousand more, left like 25,000 people homeless. And this is a small city. It was a huge disaster, but so many people do not even know about it. It was the biggest man-made explosion before Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And for me, it was a chance to bring something that is so big and so important to a wider audience. I did a tea event here in Halifax with Kate Quinn and Madeline Martin back in 2024 when the book had been out for a couple of months. And one of the questions was about research. And, Madeline had gone to Poland and Kate was talking about some of her research. And my sort of joke was that my research was very difficult and I had to look for parking in downtown Halifax because I live here. And even with Ship of Dreams being set on Titanic, I bring it home to Halifax because there's such a Halifax connection after the sinking. And I got to do that portion of the research here at home as well. And there's something really, really great about, taking a place where you live and you love it and then being able to showcase that to a wider audience.
I love that. And I think that it allows people to see a part of the world, even though Canada is a huge part of the world, like see it in a different light and see that Canadian spirit, because what happened was that the Canadian people really rallied together to take care of people and care for them. And you have a nurse in when the world fell silent. So you've got that kind of caretaking in there. And to me personally, I see a lot of you in that. And I think that's what personally, it just like a twist on what you're talking about. I think it's like who you are as a person. Your friendships are super important. You take care of other people. You worry about other people. And I think that comes through in the characters that you create.
Well, I did ask you about relating to my characters, and Charlotte is different in that book, different from Nora. She has a really difficult time after the explosion. I don't want to give stuff away, but I also relate to her because she goes through a mental health break. And I experienced that. I had postpartum depression after my youngest was born. And I'm never shy about talking about it because it happens. And so I drew on that experience when I was writing Charlotte's character. And then I found the same thing in Ship of Dreams. Again, I have two women who are very different, but they're best friends. And one is very much into family and caring for people and that whole sort of caretaker, home and hearth kind of person. And her best friend is Lou, and Lou is a suffragette. And there's a line in there where she's talking about Hannah's husband. She's like, "Oh, he was such a man." And that's also me. The older I get, the saltier I get.
Right.
So that's also me. So I like to think that when I write characters, there's always an angle of that makes its way into that character.
So I've always said that even the mean old lady that lives by herself is a little bit of me. And then, the grumpy old man at the end of the bar, also me. There's all these different sides of us that we get to put on the page that you can't probably do in polite society.
You be a grumpy old man at the end of the bar. Right. And I've known you a long time.
I don't know. I'd definitely be at the end of the bar having a Canadian pour.
All right. That made an appearance last week. I'm not going to lie.
I do miss those. We were at a conference one time and we had wine, and, I'm used to a regular American glass of wine, which is like half filled, if that, like a third, so I can breathe or whatever stupid stuff they're doing, because I don't care. But the Canadian pours all the way to the top. That's my kind of glass of wine.
All the way to the top. And honestly, it's just like, why would you only fill the glass half full? You're just going to have to come back in 5 minutes.
That's right.
So
That's right.
Last week, I was doing some author events, and the Canadian pour did come out on the last night.
We have known each other from almost the beginning. I don't actually even remember when or how we've met, because we've known each other for so long. We've traveled in that same circle. If I hadn't had you guys to bounce things off of, to talk to just get through the ups and downs of this industry. I don't know what I would have done because it's a
Yeah.
very, very lonely job. And as much as my husband loves me, he does not speak writer. He doesn't listen when I talk about my plot. He doesn't get it when I'm like terrified to send my manuscript out because I'm thinking it's crap. Whereas other writers really get it. And it's because there was a whole shutdown with COVID and we had no in person for so many years.
Yeah.
Seeing you, talking to you, and everything became, or and other writers became super important.
What I love is that I was just so happy to see your face this morning, to do this.
Right.
So,
And I
yeah.
went to the Historical Fiction Writers Conference, even though I have no intention of ever writing historical fiction, just to
Yeah,
be with you guys and to be among other writers. Cause it had been like
I know.
4 years since I'd been to a conference. I was just like, oh, can I just hug everybody in the room?
I know, I know. And I was so glad to go to that conference because
Mm-hmm.
you're right. It had been such a long time. I think 2019 had been our last conference.
Right.
And yeah, severe withdrawal. But I think the memories I take away from that and the things of value, it was 3 or 4 days in the middle of the summer generally,
Right.
where for that amount of time, we all got together and we all spoke the same language
Mm-hmm.
and we all knew what it was like to be doing this job. And being a part of that was very restorative.
It was.
And
Yes.
and that's what I take away the most is just how feeling like I was among my people. There are a lot of times that this job can get difficult, or you feel isolated, or feel like you're working in a vacuum,
Mm-hmm.
and just finding other people who are doing what you're doing, and just even if it's just getting a coffee or
Right.
doing a Zoom chat or something, but just feeling like you're connecting with somebody can really help keep you going.
Yeah, my dream is to have like a regular writing retreat kind of thing. We've talked about it a million times, and I think we need to find a way to do it for sure because it would be awesome. When the World Fell Silent did really, really well, you were on multiple bestseller lists for a really long time. Did that make you
Yeah.
feel a lot of pressure when you put out Ship of Dreams? Because I remember the first time I had a bestseller list and I was like paralyzed for like 3 days. I couldn't write. And this wasn't even when I hit the New York Times list. This was just a lesser list, if you will. Like it
Yeah.
was so much pressure to be able to do it again.
Yes and no. Also, what I found really difficult was um, when the World Fell Silent took off here in Canada, and all of a sudden I was getting attention,
Mm-hmm.
which I wasn't used to. I mean, romance writers quite often, like you're on your socials and stuff, but you can fly under the radar quite a bit. But I was doing more in person things. I was getting attention for being on the Toronto Star and the Global Mail list, and it stayed there for like 40 weeks. It was like
Yeah, it's
ridiculous.
amazing.
And this is where being in the industry a long time, I think, was helpful. I also knew that with When the World Fell Silent, I got into Costco in
Mm-hmm.
Canada. So I
Wow.
knew that would automatically help with numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I also knew that Costco after that really pared back their book section. Now there's just a little table with a few
Mm-hmm.
books. It's horrible. And so I knew Ship of Dreams was not going to get that. I knew I still had publisher backing, but I already knew that this book was not going to be the lightning in a bottle that
Mm-hmm.
When the World Fell Silent was. So I actually told myself to not worry about it because I had written the best book I could. I loved the cover.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what the plans were for it, and I knew what my promotional plans and publicity plans were. And like my ducks were in a row. And I just thought anything that happens outside of that is out of my control. I'm also in this for the long haul. So I'm not going to worry about one book and about things I can't control. And so now I just work on the next book and just work on writing the best book possible, and making sure I do my part. At some point, you kind of hope for the best.
Right.
So I really try to not put that much pressure on myself. It did make the list, just
Mm-hmm.
not for as long. It's the right place, right time, right book for the moment, right distribution. It gets picked up for something, and so you ride the wave while you have it, do
Mm-hmm.
what you can to maintain it, but at some point you have to let go. Because otherwise, when you're writing your next book, all you'll be doing is having that little voice behind you saying, but what if this doesn't do as well?
Right.
Or your numbers weren't as great on your last book. Like, you don't want that voice in your head when you're trying to create an amazing story. So I just tell her to shut up.
That's a great way to do it. And it's true. Like the only thing you can control is the quality of the words you put on the page. Everything else, no matter how, even when you're self publishing, no matter how much you think you're controlling it, is truly out of your control. Somebody else could come out with a very similar cover. Amazon could reject it for 60 different reasons, or,
Like your
somebody could.
account spontaneously. Like,
Right. Or
oh,
you could get a bad review. Like, this is why I don't read reviews. I don't look at sales numbers. I just take the checks and cash them. Like, otherwise I will stress, because I'm like, okay, so this sold this many copies last month. I need to sell more copies. And I'm
yeah,
grateful that I have a full-time job. And so I have income coming in. So I'm not reliant on the books. And so I
yeah,
don't have to worry about them as much. But even when I was primarily writing books full time, I always had another stream of income. So I was never constantly focused on the numbers. Otherwise, it will kill your creativity, and you'll be constantly trying to chase a trend or chase a number or chase something that
can for
is never
sure.
going to work.
Especially if you're
Yeah.
coming at it from a place of scarcity, right? Like you've
Yes.
got that scarcity mindset, and it can kill it. I do look at my statements to see what's selling where and like which
Mhm.
format's really selling. Or, I'll look at a statement after if my publisher has a book club or does
Mhm.
a Kindle monthly deal or something, and then I'll go and I'll look at it and like I like to be informed, but I don't get like really granular with it
Mhm.
because that's not my job.
Right.
That's someone in the sales department's job, and they can make decisions based on that. But if I can be informed, then at least I can have conversations with my publisher about it
Right.
and not be you know, completely in the dark. So I think there's a bit of a balance there for me.
Mhm.
But you're right. There's a great line in Big Magic by Liz Gilbert,
Mhm.
which is about not putting your financial well-being, burden of your financial well-being on your creativity because it will kill it.
Yes.
And I really feel like that's true. You can still write and put books out and have dead creativity. It just means that you're going through the motions,
Mhm.
and it won't be your best work. Or you'll do it because like it's like you have brain muscle memory or something, but you won't feel fulfilled because you're always just wondering, like worrying about your creativity paying the bills. And there is something to be said about um, having another job. Or let's face it, most writers can't afford to write full time,
Mhm.
and so they either have a different job, or they are sadly in this gig economy that we find ourselves in,
Mhm.
and doing like a ton of side hustles to bring in bits and pieces, and altogether it makes an income.
It's always hard because you're juggling multiple things. And right now, with the company that I'm running, I'm juggling a lot of things there, and then the channel, and then the books, and then a million other things. But there's another part of me that would never have it any other way, because I would be bored if I wasn't doing that.
Yeah,
So, that
yeah.
self-flagellation of let's get busier. And yes, let's say yes
Right?
to
Like,
that.
yeah, I can't imagine you not being busy and idle or coming up with something new.
One of the things that you did really well before you started doing historical fiction was take your backlist and turn that into a good
Yeah.
second income for you. You really were
Hmm.
smart at how to market your indie books and how to take them and really elevate your income. What did you take from those lessons that you did as an indie author to bring to going back to a traditional author?
Oh, that's a really good question. So if I have conversations with the marketing team or the PR team, I do come from a place where I can have some idea of what I'm talking about because I've
Mm-hmm.
been doing this, you know, on my own. Because I started that in 2020, and I think I've re-released like 45 books, covers, metadata. I had to learn everything. It was a huge learning curve. And also, I learned a lot, but I also learned that I can't get really granular with with data. And some people really thrive on that, but that would have killed my creativity dead. So I always felt like I dug down just deep enough to make informed decisions. I think it's a mindset thing. And so now when I make decisions with my agent, with my publisher, I talk about markets and how things perform in places and, what we might want to do and, you know, things that we might want to negotiate and that kind of thing. And I think it just comes from the experience of doing that. I'm very lucky that I've had a lot of input into my cover, which has been really great. I'm still sort of pivoting with that backlist and I really don't have much more that's eligible for reversion. So thankfully these books don't have to work as hard. So I wrote When the World Fell Silent on spec. So no advance, no nothing. And the indie backlist actually had to work hard in order for me to maintain an income. And it did, but I also worked hard. I was working, probably 6-7 days a week and well, on the weekends, maybe not full days, but like I was definitely working till like 8 at night and it was just a lot. Even now I got some feedback from booksellers, like I listen to booksellers. And I've taken one of my series and done all new covers for it. And now I'm sort of tracking if sales are increasing from that, what's happening from that. So
right. And always pivoting, always evolving, which is part of, I think, being a creative person and part of what makes it fun and panicky.
It is. I was looking for, like, I fully admit I was looking for a new talent. And I sure found one.
Right.
But I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry at all. And I was so pleased with how When the World Fell Silent turned out after revision. And, Ship of Dreams was its own experience. But I ended up, finishing that book just a year ago, March 30th, I handed it in. And that was just probably the most rewarding writing experience I've had in my life. So with my next book, I have 2 main characters again, but I also have a Canadian section, and then I have a section that is in England, and then I have a section that is in France leading up to D-Day. And I'm just like, why did I think I should do 3 countries, like settings in 3 countries and, a year and a half in time? Like, what was I thinking? So that's a whole new challenge this time.
It makes it fun though, and it gives you a great tax write-off. And Ship of Dreams will be out in the US on March 30th. So a year to the day from when you finished it, it's going to be out in the US for US buyers. So that's awesome.
Ship of Dreams is out in ebook and audio already. It's the paperback that's coming to the US, which is really exciting because that tends to be the format that people read the most. One we are looking at, I think my contract just says like mid 2027, but as long as I get it in on time, maybe it'll be, to the early end of that. Who knows? Publisher scheduling is an enigma.
It certainly is.
But yeah, next year. So far, it's called Codename Songbird.
I thank you for being here today. And we definitely have to do this in person next time so we can have that Canadian pour of a glass of wine. Well, I will put all the links down below and you guys can join me on the next one.